Okay guys, I wanted to show you some BOZO moves people make, a lot of kids make, that you can really, if you play against them correctly, you can get a very good game. Now, what a lot of people do is they move their F-pawn sometimes, and you really normally shouldn't move the F-pawn, because when you move the F-pawn, see the F-pawn, it opens up the king. And so let me give you one example. And this example happens all the time with a lot of my students and sometimes who my students play. Pawn to E4, see pawn E4, good move, center pawn. Black plays another good move, pawn E5, and then white plays a great move here, or a pretty good move. Can you guys guess what a good move might be here? There's probably 4 or 5. Take a guess, pause the video if you need to. Okay, well, knight to C3 is pretty good. Bishop to C4 is a good move. And knight F3 is good. There's some other ones too, but knight F3 may be the most common. Knight to F3, threatening that pawn. Now, black can guard that pawn in a couple different ways that are pretty good moves. But one thing I see a lot is people use their F-pawn to guard it. So not only does this open up some lines to your king, it takes away your best knight square. So it's a bad move for black. But wait till you see what white can actually do here. Watch this. White could just play knight takes pawn. Now, at the very least, white will probably win that pawn. Black doesn't have to take it. But if black does take it, can anybody see the awesome move white can play? And again, it has to do with the open lines to the black king. Anybody see it? It's not too hard to find. I'll give you one other hint. It's a check. Okay? Queen to H5 check. You're checking the king and threatening the pawn. Now, if they move their king, and the only spot they can move the king to is here, you take with a check. And this goes into a principle I always tell kids. I say, try to check up close and with different pieces. So do you see another piece you can check the king with now, if you're white, besides the queen? If you said bishop c4, you were correct. Bishop c4 check, maybe the king runs over here. I like this, an up close check, right up close. King has to go here, his only choice. And here you can get another piece involved to check, a new piece, and you can get it involved to check without even moving the piece. Can you see it? It's a check you can make with a new piece, but you don't actually move that piece. Pawn to D4, checking with the bishop. Now they can block, and then maybe you can play pawn to H4. So you're going to probably checkmate black pretty soon here. So let's go back to that position we were just looking at, where black played the BOZO move of moving his F-pawn. So here we go. It was just like this, and we said knight takes the pawn. Now if black takes, what's that move again? For white, queen H5 check. Now they could block, but then of course we just do what? We just take the pawn with a check, and we're threatening the rook. So we're going to probably take the rook on the next move. We should take the rook on the next move. Okay, so let's take a look at another example of a BOZO move that has to do with moving maybe the F-pawn. Or even with moving a different pawn. We'll look at a couple. Let's say white plays here, and black plays pawn to E5, and then white plays D4. Now that move I don't always say is so great, because if black plays correctly, black should just take, queen takes, if queen takes, and now knight develops and threatens the queen. So I think black does pretty well with that. He develops a piece, the queen has to move again, and then maybe black would develop his other knight. But let's say that after pawn to D4, black plays kind of a BOZO move and plays D6. What do you guys think the best move is here? Pause the video if you need to. What's the best move here for white? Okay, if you just said pawn takes pawn, you would be right. Pawn takes pawn, winning the pawn, or if they take back, then you can trade queens. Now you might say, but Mr. Dean, so what? You trade queens. I lose a queen as white, they lose a queen as black. Isn't that equal? It's equal in points, but not equal in king safety or position, because then the king has to move and that black king can't castle. You as white can still develop, get pieces out. I'm just going to give you a few moves in a row, and then castle, 1, 2, over. Black is not going to do that. It's going to be a lot harder for black to keep the king safe. Okay, one final one. One final one, and it'll be almost like the first one. Let's say you're white, e4, e5, and you play pawn f4. Now this is called the King's Gambit. I wouldn't recommend playing the King's Gambit unless you read about it. You read about how to play it, and maybe we'll make a video on that one time. But that's the King's Gambit. A good move for black would be maybe just to take the pawn. But let's say again, black plays pawn f6. And we know why pawn f6 is generally a bad move. It blocks in the best knight square. It opens up lines to the king. So what should we do as white? What should we do? Okay, it's pretty much the same thing. If you said pawn takes pawn, you're correct. You take, black takes back. What's a good move here for white? Look at the open lines black has on the king. If you say queen to h5 check, you would be right. And then you get to do all that fun stuff. Either they move the king or they block. You take the pawn check. Maybe you can win that rook, and your opponent looks a little bit like a bozo. Maybe for the next bozo, I'll wear a bozo clown wig. That would be neat. All right, well guys, I hope you liked the video, and we'll see you next time. Remember the chess tournament's on March 4th. That should be a fun scholastic tournament coming up. We'll also put out our summer camps pretty soon. Summer camps are always a lot of fun. We can do a lot of things in a several hour span, a lot of activities. All right, we'll see you next time.